Marcus Thompson, the most powerful real estate developer in Chicago, was running through Lincoln Park trying to escape the thoughts that tormented him. His multi-million-dollar company was under attack, and his business partners were betraying him. But when he turned the corner near North Pond, he saw a scene that stopped his heart cold. His daughter Sophie, 8 years old, was sitting on a bench next to a boy who looked like a vagrant. Torn clothes, hole-filled shoes, dirty hair, everything screamed danger. Marcus prepared to drag his daughter away and call the police, but what he heard froze him in place. The boy was reciting Shakespeare from memory, explaining ancient philosophy with a competence that even university professors didn't possess. Who was this homeless kid really? And why was his daughter listening to him like he was the most important man in the world? What Marcus discovered in the next few minutes would forever change 3 destinies and reveal a truth no one expected. Marcus Thompson ran as if his life depended on every step. The cold October wind whipped his face as he crossed the paths of Lincoln Park, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the torment tearing apart his mind. At 45, he had built a real estate empire worth hundreds of millions, but now everything was crumbling. The documents he had found on his desk that morning were the final proof. His longtime business partners, those he considered brothers, were orchestrating a hostile takeover to steal his company. 20 years of work, sacrifice, sleepless nights, all to enrich the traitors he had nurtured in his own bosom. His daughter Sophie was the only pure thing left to him in this world of deception. 8 years old, blonde hair like her mother who died in childbirth, blue eyes that sparkled with precocious intelligence. She should have been home with the housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez. Immersed in the study program, Marcus had planned to make her the perfect heir to his empire. But when he turned the corner near North Pond, Marcus saw something that made him stop abruptly. Blood froze in his veins. Sophie was sitting on a wrought iron park bench, completely alone with a stranger who looked like one of those dangerous vagrants that infested the park. The boy looked like he'd stepped out of a nightmare. 18 at most, so thin that bones protruded through his clothes. A wool jacket that had once been elegant now hung in tatters from bony shoulders. The jeans were more holes than fabric. The sneakers showed bare toes. The brown hair was long and disheveled, the face dirty but with features suggesting a fallen noble origin. Marcus felt adrenaline explode in his veins. All the talks he'd had with Sophie about safety, all the warnings about the dangers of the outside world, all forgotten by this stubborn child who had inherited his rebellious character. He moved toward them with determined steps, preparing the harsh words he would use to drive away this charlatan. But when he was close enough to hear their voices, something stopped him, as if he'd hit an invisible wall. The boy was speaking, but these weren't the ravings of a drug addict or the pleas of a beggar. His voice was melodious, educated, rich with a culture you'd never expect from someone in his condition. He was reciting verses from Shakespeare, explaining the meaning of Hamlet with breathtaking competence. Marcus hid behind a tree, incredulous. This homeless person was giving his daughter a lesson in English literature worth more than months of private school. And Sophie, who usually got bored after 5 minutes of any study, hung on his every word with complete attention. The boy spoke of Hamlet's journey through madness and revenge, but he did it in a way that even an 8-year-old could understand. He explained how every character was punished in a way that reflected their guilt, how justice was perfect even when it seemed cruel. His words painted images so vivid that Marcus himself was captured by the story. Sophie interrupted with a question that hit straight to the heart. She asked if good people sometimes end up in hell by mistake. The boy looked at her with eyes that were too old for that young face, and Marcus saw deep pain shine in those dark pupils. The answer came with wisdom that chilled Marcus to the bone. Sometimes, the boy explained, good people end up in hell on earth, not because of their sins, but because of others. And when that happens, They must find the strength to keep believing in justice, even when everything seems lost. Then Sophie did something that changed everything. She opened her pink backpack and pulled out the sandwich Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared for her snack. She broke it in half with her delicate little hands and offered a piece to the boy, saying with the disarming simplicity of childhood that food always tastes better when you share it. Marcus watched the boy look at that piece of sandwich as if it were a priceless treasure. His hands trembled as he took it, and when he murmured thanks, his voice was broken with emotion. He ate slowly, as if wanting to make every bite last an eternity. And Marcus realized he probably hadn't touched food in days. While the boy ate, Sophie continued asking questions with the pure curiosity that only children possess. What was his name? Where did he come from? Why did he know so many beautiful things? And above all, why was he so sad? The boy introduced himself as Jake Miller, and when Sophie said her full name and added that her dad had lots of money but never had time to tell her such beautiful stories, Marcus felt those words like knife stabs. Jake looked up and saw Marcus hidden behind the tree. Their eyes met across the distance, and Marcus saw something he didn't expect. Not fear or embarrassment, but a quiet dignity that left him speechless. It was like looking into the eyes of a fallen prince who hadn't forgotten his nobility. When Jake whispered something in Sophie's ear and she ran to her father with innocent joy, Marcus approached, not knowing what to say. He had prepared a stern speech, threats, orders to disappear. But looking into those eyes that had seen too much pain for their young age, all words of anger died in his throat. Jake stood from the bench and introduced himself with a voice that was both respectful and dignified. He complimented Sophie, defining her as a special child with rare curiosity and kindness in the world. He didn't ask for money, didn't justify himself, didn't beg. He maintained a composure that Marcus had never seen in any beggar. Driven by an impulse he couldn't explain, Marcus asked Jake where he had studied. The answer hit him like lightning from a clear sky. Northwestern University, degree in economics and master's in philosophy. The same university where Marcus had laid the foundations of his empire 30 years earlier. At that moment, looking at this boy who maintained his dignity despite total misery, Marcus Thompson understood he was about to hear a story that would forever change the course of 3 lives. The revelation that Jake had studied at Northwestern hit Marcus like a slap. He looked at the boy with different eyes, noticing details that had escaped him before. The upright posture despite everything, the politeness in gestures, the aristocratic bearing. Sophie asked her father if they could take Jake for pizza, explaining with childish concern that the boy hadn't eaten in 2 days. Marcus agreed, surprising himself, but set a firm condition. He wanted to know the whole truth about Jake's life. As they walked to a nearby restaurant, Jake told his story. 3 years ago, he had been the rising star of American economics, summa cum laude at Northwestern, master's in philosophy, scholarship won for Oxford. His father owned a respected construction company in Milwaukee. His mother taught literature at the local high school. Then came the tragedy. A bridge his father's company was building collapsed during a summer storm. 2 workers died. The investigation revealed that someone had replaced certified steel with inferior material. All suspicions fell on Miller Construction. The trial lasted 2 years. 2 years of hell for the family. Jake had to leave university. The Oxford dream shattered. His mother died of a heart attack the day his father was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Jake was left completely alone at 20. He spent a year looking for work, but as soon as someone heard his name, he was fired. The Miller name had become synonymous with death in the Midwest construction industry. 6 months ago, he ended up on the streets. Sophie interrupted with childish wisdom, saying Jake's dad was innocent because bad people have different eyes. She stood up and hugged him spontaneously. Jake returned the embrace as years of held-back tears flowed. Marcus made an impulsive decision. He offered Jake to come with them and promised to find the truth and create justice. Jake protested, but Marcus insisted. This wasn't about charity, but justice. Marcus's mansion in Lincoln Park rose like an 18th-century palace, restored with impeccable taste. After a hot bath and clean clothes from Marcus's wardrobe, Jake seemed transformed. The aristocratic features hidden by dirt were now evident. During dinner, Marcus observed the boy's extraordinary intelligence emerge in every conversation. Jake quoted poets from memory, discussed international economics with competence, explained complex philosophical theories with disarming simplicity. It was clear the streets hadn't extinguished his brilliant mind. That night, Marcus locked himself in his private study. Something about the boy's story didn't convince him. His business instinct told him there were missing pieces in the puzzle, hidden truths beyond simple misfortune. At 3 in the morning, after hours of research, he found what his instinct had detected. An article from 4 years earlier spoke of an FBI investigation into a criminal network operating in the construction sector. The system was sophisticated. Shell companies replaced certified materials with inferior ones, then sold the originals on the black market. Among the names never prosecuted, Marcus found what he was looking for: Richter Construction. His heart began beating hard. Victor Richter was one of his partners, the one orchestrating the hostile takeover. The next day, lawyer Stephen Hayes re-examined the Miller case following Marcus's suggested lead. What emerged in 2 weeks
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
was a completely different scenario. The steel invoices showed subtle but obvious irregularities. Witnesses had connections to Richter's network. Documents contained evidence ignored during the trial. Jake's father had been chosen as the perfect scapegoat, a small, honest entrepreneur without resources to defend himself adequately. When Hayes called with proof of the father's complete innocence, Jake broke into liberating tears. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. The documents revealed that the secret partners in the hostile takeover were Marcus's own business associates. Marcus realized his company wasn't just under commercial attack, but had been infiltrated by criminals wanting to use it as cover. In that moment, Marcus understood a profound truth. Saving this innocent boy meant also saving himself and his company. The following weeks shook Chicago to its foundations. The reopened investigation into the Miller case revealed a corruption network that newspapers called the biggest construction scandal in Midwest history in 20 years. Jake experienced daily resurrection. Every morning in the Thompson mansion, every hour helping Marcus analyze legal documents, every moment with Sophie, who treated him like the brother she never had. Everything restored pieces of his soul he thought lost forever. Victor Richter, cornered by evidence collected by lawyer Hayes, collapsed during the first interrogation. His confessions opened a chasm in Chicago's business world. Names of corrupt politicians, bought judges, a criminal network that had operated for years, replacing materials in hundreds of construction sites. The most painful confession for Marcus concerned his partner's betrayal. Richter revealed the hostile takeover had been planned to eliminate the only obstacle to their criminal expansion. Marcus was too honest, too scrupulous, impossible to corrupt. He had to be removed. The most emotional moment came with the verdict of complete acquittal and rehabilitation of Jake's father. The man, aged 20 years in 2 years of unjust imprisonment, left Cook County Jail in his son's arms, who had never stopped believing in his innocence. That evening, Marcus organized a dinner at his mansion that remained in everyone's memory. Marcus rose for a heartfelt toast. He confessed to being a rich but internally poor man who had forgotten the value of things money can't buy. Looking at Jake, he said the boy had taught him that true wealth lies in the dignity with which one faces defeats. He offered Jake's father to become director of Thompson Holdings' new ethics department. The old miller accepted with tears in his eyes, finally free to prove the integrity that had always characterized his family. But Marcus reserved the biggest surprise for Jake. He offered him to return to university, realize the Oxford dream, rebuild the brilliant future stolen from him. Jake looked at this family that had saved him, then at Sophie, who hung on his every word. With a firm voice, he declared he wanted to stay, become part of Thompson Holdings, but above all, continue being the big brother Sophie deserved. In that evening of celebration, 3 people united by destiny through a shared sandwich looked toward a future that finally promised justice, love, and true family. 2 years after that October afternoon that changed everything, the Thompson mansion had become something completely different. No longer the silent refuge of a lonely man with his daughter, but a house full of life, projects, and laughter, echoing in every room. Jake had resumed his studies with a scholarship Marcus established at Northwestern for victims of judicial errors. He studied business law and corporate ethics, determined to revolutionize the system that had destroyed his family. Every morning he had breakfast with Sophie before going to university, helping her with homework and telling her stories that made her dream. The girl, now 10 years old, had become a brilliant student with an extraordinary passion for literature. Her teachers were amazed by the maturity of her reflections. When asked for the secret, she always replied that Jake had taught her that books contain answers to all life's questions. Jake's father had transformed Marcus's company into the integrity model of the American construction industry. Thompson Holdings had become stronger after eliminating all corrupt elements, attracting ethical investors from across the country. But the deepest change concerned Marcus himself. The man who once lived for work now stopped every evening at 6 to dine with family. He had discovered those moments around the table were worth more than any $1 million deal. When Jake graduated with highest honors, Marcus organized an unforgettable celebration. During the toast, Jake told how an 8-year-old girl had restored his faith in humanity and how a powerful man had chosen justice over convenience. He announced that he and Marcus wanted to create America's first major company completely dedicated to ethical construction, a model for the entire country. That night, looking at the stars, Jake confessed to Marcus that he had never lost hope and now had a family that loved him. Marcus realized this young man had become the son he never had. 3 people united by destiny looked toward an extraordinary future, having learned that the most beautiful family is born from the daily choice to love each other. 5 years after that Sunday that rewrote 3 destinies, the Thompson-Miller family story had become legend throughout America, not just in newspapers that called it the Chicago Miracle, but in the hearts of people who still believed in the possibility of changing the world through pure generosity. Sophie was 13 and had grown into an extraordinary girl. The child who shared sandwiches was now an excellent student who spoke 4 languages and played piano, but above all had maintained the pure heart that made her special from childhood. One evening, during one of the family dinners that had become the most sacred moment of the day, Sophie made an announcement that left everyone breathless. She wanted to use her 13 years to do something big, open a foundation to help boys like Jake, those who lost everything due to injustice. She would call it Second Chance Foundation, and offer not just money, but what had been even more valuable, a family that believes in you when everything seems lost. Marcus looked at her with pride that swelled his chest. His daughter had inherited his entrepreneurial spirit, but added something it had taken him years to learn: true compassion. Jake, now 28 and majority partner of Thompson Holdings along with Marcus, smiled looking at this girl who continued to amaze him. He told her he was proud to be her brother and would help her realize this dream. 2 months later, Second Chance Foundation opened in a building in downtown Chicago that Marcus had donated and Jake had personally designed. It was a complete center with dormitories, study rooms, labs, a huge library, and above all, apartments where young people could live while rebuilding their lives. The first boy they welcomed was named Alex. 18 years old, orphan, ended up on the streets after aging out of the foster system. When Sophie met him, she saw in his eyes the same desperation she remembered in Jake's eyes 5 years earlier. She explained it wasn't charity they offered, but justice and family, because everyone deserves someone who believes in them. Alex looked at her incredulously. A 13-year-old girl was offering him more than any adult ever had. When he asked why, Sophie answered with characteristic simplicity, because 5 years ago she met a special boy who taught her that sharing means multiplying happiness. In the following months, the foundation welcomed dozens of young people, former innocent prisoners, victims of judicial errors, youth who had lost everything due to others' corruption. Each found not just a roof and job, but a family that welcomed them without prejudice. On the evening of the 5th anniversary of the park encounter, the Thompson mansion hosted a party that went down in Chicago history. All the boys helped by the foundation were there. Judges, ethical entrepreneurs, journalists, and hundreds of people who had followed the story over the years. Jake rose for the evening's final speech. Now he was a mature man, respected throughout America as an example of redemption and ethical success. But when he spoke, his voice was still that of the boy who had received half a sandwich from a child 5 years earlier. He told how destiny had used a child's innocence to save 3 lives and create a family that hadn't existed in their most beautiful dreams. How a gesture of pure generosity had triggered a chain of events that brought justice, love, and hope to hundreds of people. He looked at Sophie, now a beautiful girl with the same purity in her eyes as when she was 8, and told her she had been the angel who saved his soul. He looked at Marcus and thanked him for teaching him that being fathers means believing in children even when they don't believe in themselves. On that October night, exactly 5 years after the encounter that changed everything, 3 people united by destiny through a shared sandwich looked at the stars knowing they had created something eternal. They had proven to the world that a true family doesn't need blood to exist. It only needs love, trust, and the daily choice to be better together. And in a city like Chicago, where success is measured in money and power, their story continued to remind everyone that the greatest wealth is what you share, and that miracles truly exist when you look for them in people's hearts. Give a like if you believe a gesture of kindness can change a life. Comment which moment of the story moved you most. Share to inspire those who still believe in the goodness of people. Subscribe for more stories of love, family, and second chances. Sometimes one generous child is enough to save a lost soul. Sometimes a shared sandwich becomes the bridge to a new life. And sometimes the most beautiful families are born from a chance encounter on a park bench. Because acts of kindness are the only currency that makes everyone richer.